Welcome back, learner. Ready for another deep dive?
Always ready to explore.
Excellent. Today, we're tackling something you use, well, probably every day, online payments.
Ah, yes, the invisible threads of commerce.
Exactly. And we're going beyond just using them. We're going to figure out how they're becoming more secure, both for you when you shop and for the businesses selling online.
It's all about trust, really, knowing that your money and your data are safe in this digital world.
Absolutely. And to do that, we're using some pretty interesting source material.
Definitely. You dug up the developer documentation from Paysafe.
I did.
This stuff is gold, learner. It's a peek behind the curtain at the tech, making a huge chunk of online payments happen. We're going to pull out the most important bits, especially how security features like 3D Secure are shaping online shopping as we know it.
All right, let's jump right in. One of the first things that really stood out was 3D Secure 2, 3DS2 for short. When a store uses this and you have to go through that extra step of confirming your card, maybe with a code or your fingerprint, it actually sets off some really interesting things.
Right. It triggers a shift in responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
If a merchant uses 3DS2, you go through the authentication, and then later there's a dispute. Maybe someone's claiming they didn't make the purchase.
Ah, that old chestnut.
Well, in those cases, if the merchant's using 3DS2 and you properly authenticated, the liability for that fraudulent transaction can actually move from the merchant to the card issuer.
So the online store is off the hook, essentially.
In many cases, yes.
Okay.
Is a huge relief for them, right? Less worry about those fraud-related chargebacks. But even more importantly, learner, think about what this means for you.
Okay, I'm thinking less risk for the businesses I buy from should mean they can offer better prices and services.
You got it. It's all interconnected. A more stable and trustworthy online marketplace for everyone.
That's a pretty sweet deal. But speaking of things not going smoothly, sometimes you get that dreaded soft decline when you're trying to buy something.
Ah, yes, the frustrating almost but not quite. Paysafe points to a few common reasons why this happens.
Lay it on me.
Well, sometimes, for whatever reason, the 3DS2 process gets skipped before the payment's even attempted. Or maybe there was a hiccup during the authentication, but the store still tries to push the payment through.
Makes sense. A system trying to be extra careful. What else?
Another possibility, that authentication process, it didn't quite finish. Maybe something went wrong with the connection or on the bank side.
Oh, I hate when that happens.
We've all been there. And here's a really interesting one. If a store keeps requesting exemptions from 3DS2 for the same customer over and over again, well, the system starts to see that as potentially risky and might trigger a soft decline.
So they're watching for patterns. Clever.
They are. There's even a specific error code you might see in situations like this. Error code 3060. The one that says your request has been declined because strong customer authentication is required. It really drives home the importance of completing that authentication step.
It's like the system saying, hold on, let's double check everything is legit here.
Exactly. Now, we've talked about the why behind 3DS2 and those soft declines, but what's actually going on under the hood?
Right. Time to get a little techie.
Let's do it. The documentation talks about 3DS object parameters. Sounds complicated, but it's really just about the essential information being exchanged during this 3D secure handshake.
Handshake, I like that. Like two systems saying hello and confirming they're both who they say they are.
Perfect analogy. So first up, you have the merchant URL, which is, well, pretty straightforward. It's the store's website address. That way the system knows exactly who's requesting this verification.
Makes sense. Location, location, location. And what about this device channel thing?
That tells the system how the purchase is happening. Like if you're using your web browser on a laptop, a mobile app on your phone, or even one of those specialized interfaces, the 3RI type.
So the path the request takes, essentially. Interesting. Then there's message category. What kind of messages are we talking about here?
The message category is just a way of categorizing the type of interaction. Usually it's going to be a payment transaction, like when you actually buy something. But it can also be non-payment, which might be for things like verifying your account or something like that. And finally, there's authentication purpose. This simply tells the system why the authentication is happening. Again, most of the time, it's just going to be a regular payment.
So kind of setting the context for the whole transaction.
You got it. Now, another term that kept popping up is payment handle. Seems like these things have a whole life cycle of their own.
Yeah, they go through a few different stages. What's the deal with that?
It's all about making sure things happen in the right order and everyone's on the same page. A payment handle, think of it like a temporary ID for your payment attempt. It starts out as initiated when it's first created. Then, if you successfully authenticate, boom, it moves to payable.
Sounds like a good thing.
It is. It's the green light. This payable status is super important because the store can only actually request the money if the payment handle is in this state.
No sneaking through any payments before everything's confirmed?
Nope. It's all about keeping things secure. Now what happens if things go wrong?
Yeah, what about those times when the internet gremlins decide to mess with us?
Well, if authentication fails for whatever reason, the payment handle goes straight to failed. And even if everything looks good, these handles have a time limit.
Like a self-destruct sequence?
Kind of. They'll automatically switch to expired after 299 seconds, which is just under 5 minutes if they haven't been used. This prevents old, unused payment attempts from just hanging around indefinitely. Security first.
Makes sense. Now, how does the store or even you indirectly know when a payment handle reaches that crucial payable status?
A few ways. The system can send a webhook notification, like a little digital alert when the status changes. Or let's say you complete the authentication process and the website redirects you to an order confirmation page. Seeing that uncompleted URL is also a sign that the payment handle is payable. And finally, the store can always directly check with Paysafe using the payment handle ID to see its current status.
Options. I like it. Now, once it's payable, what's the actual trigger for the money to move? The documentation mentions a payment handle token.
Bingo. When a payment handle is successfully created and authenticated, the system sends back this unique payment handle token. It's like a one-time use code that the store then uses to actually start the process of charging your card or whatever payment method you used.
Okay, the final key to unlock the funds. Makes sense. Now let's dive into how different card companies handle the results of 3D Secure. The Visa section was particularly interesting.
Definitely. It highlights the importance of understanding who's responsible if something goes wrong. According to Visa, if your authentication is a clear Y for yes, everything checks out. A special value called the ECI, the Electronic Commerce Indicator, gets set to 5.
5. Okay. What's significant about that?
It's a risk indicator. In this Y scenario, liability shifts to Visa, the card issuer, and the payment handle status is, you guessed it, payable. Transaction should go through without a hitch.
So a happy ending for everyone. But what if the authentication wasn't perfect? Like maybe there was a slight hiccup, but it still kind of worked.
That's where the A result comes in, attempted authentication. In this case, the ECI is 6. And what's fascinating is that the liability still rests with the card issuer and the payment handle is still payable. Visa is essentially saying, we're confident enough to cover this.
Interesting. So both Y and A mean the store is protected. But what happens if the authentication flat out fails, isn't available, or gets rejected? Those are N, U, and R, right?
You got it. N for failed, U for unavailable, and R for rejected. In these cases, the ECI is 7, and another value, CAVV cardholder authentication verification value, isn't there. The responsibility shifts back to the merchant, and the payment handle is failed. The documentation strongly recommends that the store does not proceed with the transaction in these cases.
Which explains why sometimes your online purchase just gets declined after that 3D Secure step.
Right. It's a safety net, a way of saying, hold on, something doesn't quite add up here.
I like it. It's reassuring to know these systems are working hard behind the scenes. Now, looking beyond card payments, Paysafe offers a whole bunch of other ways to pay online, like these embedded wallets they mentioned.
Yeah, these are pretty cool. Think of it like having a little digital wallet built right into the store's website or app. Paysafe offers this for Europe, the UK, and the US. Customers can add money, spend it, and sometimes even withdraw.
Streamlining the process for everyone. And they've also got this crypto on-ramp through Skrill. That's interesting with how much crypto is growing.
Skrill is another payment platform owned by Paysafe. So this feature basically lets users buy cryptocurrencies directly through their Skrill account. It's like a bridge between traditional finance and the world of digital currencies.
Breaking the gap? I like it. And for businesses that use Paysafe as a platform, it looks like they offer onboarding solutions too.
Imagine you're running a big online marketplace with loads of sellers. Paysafe gives you the tools to create a smooth, branded experience for those sellers to sign up and get onboarded, all without you having to build that system yourself.
That's pretty convenient.
Ah.
Okay, what about when things need to be reversed, like a return? They mention refunds and original credits.
Right. Sometimes things don't work out. The API handles refunds for those settled card payments, sending the money back to the customer. And original credits, this is a handy feature. It lets businesses send money to a customer's card, even if there wasn't an initial purchase.
Like for loyalty programs or maybe a goodwill gesture?
Exactly. Both of these are managed through those specific digital pathways, the API endpoints.
And for all these actions, it seems like the payment handle's pretty central. Can you walk us through the typical flow of a card payment as described in the documentation?
Sure. It usually starts with the store creating that payment handle. After you go through the 3D secure authentication, hopefully it reaches that payable status. Then, using the payment handle token, the store requests authorization for the payment. At this point, they usually don't actually take the money yet. It's just an authorization.
Got it. So it's like reserving the funds. Why do they do it that way?
It gives them flexibility. Let's say you ordered a physical product. The store would want to ship that out first before actually taking the money. Once the product's on its way, then they use that same payment handle token, along with a specific payment that they got during authorization, to request the settlement.
Authorize when the order is placed, settle when it ships. Makes sense. What about those original credits? How do they work with the whole payment handle thing?
Original credits are a little different. The money isn't instantly sent to your card when the request is made. Instead, it's bundled into the next batch of payments that Paysafe processes, similar to how regular settlements happen daily.
So a little more like a scheduled transfer. Interesting. Now let's talk addresses. Seems like the system has pretty specific ways of handling this vital piece of information.
Absolutely. To ensure your order ends up at the right doorstep, and for billing purposes, they have fields for every detail you can think of. City, country using the 2-letter code, an indicator for your default shipping address if it is, even a nickname for the address like home or work. Then, of course, your phone, the recipient name, the state, the street, a secondary street too if needed, and of course the zip code.
Wow, that's comprehensive. Every little bit of data accounted for. Now, back to those alternative payment methods. They mentioned something called alternate payments with token. How does that work?
It's all about making those non-card payments smooth and secure. When you use something like Interac, a unique token can be generated. This token then works with their alternate payments API to confirm things like your payer ID and shipping address. It's like a double check to make sure everything matches up.
Adding that extra layer of security. Now, for our UK listeners, the documentation specifically mentions BACS direct debit. Why is that so important?
BACS direct debit is a super common way to handle recurring payments in the UK, like subscriptions or bills. And Paysafe supports this using webhooks, those automatic notifications. These webhooks are sent for both the initial setup and the ongoing payments.
So the store gets real-time updates on what's happening.
Exactly. For example, they get a notification when the payment handle becomes payment handle payable, meaning it's ready to be used for a direct debit. And then, for the payments themselves, they get notifications for things like payment completed when the transfer's been initiated, settlement completed when the funds are processed, and even settlement cleared if everything's good to go.
So they know right away if a payment has any issues.
You bet. They also get notifications like payment return completed if the bank reports a problem, or payment failed if something's wrong, during Paysafe's own checks. These real-time updates are super important for businesses to manage those direct debits effectively.
For businesses getting set up on Paysafe, especially those with multiple sellers, the onboarding could seem daunting. But they have this batch applications API. How does that make things easier?
It's a real time saver. This API lets them submit applications for a whole bunch of merchants at once, in one go, rather than individually. Talk about cutting down on paperwork.
That's a huge efficiency boost. What other benefits does this batch processing offer?
Well, on top of that, you could include details for multiple legal entities and business locations for each merchant in a single batch. You can even set up different bank accounts for each one. Plus, it automates things like checking the application status and creating the merchant accounts. And if there are any hiccups during the process, the API flags those and sends back detailed information, including those webhook notifications we talked about. Makes troubleshooting a breeze.
It's not just about doing things in bulk. It's about making the whole process smarter and smoother. Now, we all know technology isn't perfect. Things go wrong. The documentation talks about card errors. What do those tell us?
Whenever there's an issue with a card transaction, the API sends back specific error codes and messages to help pinpoint the problem. Like error code 5068 usually means there's something wrong with the information sent in the request.
Missing info, wrong format, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And the message usually points to the specific field that's causing the trouble. They even give an example where the street address was too short, and the message clearly states that. Super helpful for debugging.
And are there specific codes for issues with 3D Secure?
Absolutely. There's a whole bunch of codes in the 5100 range specifically related to 3D Secure. Like codes 5100, 5101, 5104, and 5105 often indicate trouble checking the card's enrollment status in 3D Secure. Others, like 5106 and 5107, signal a transaction failing due to rules based on the 3D Secure result. Knowing these codes makes life a lot easier for developers to figure out and fix any 3D Secure-related hiccups.
So it's like a secret language for developers to decode the problem. Pretty cool. Now, within the 3D Secure process itself, they mentioned a challenge function. What's that all about?
The challenge function is part of that advanced 3DS2 system, where your bank might need some extra confirmation from you, like a one-time password or something. This function uses a callback mechanism. Think of it as a way for the system to report back the outcome of the challenge. If there's an error during the challenge, the callback function receives an error report with details like the code, a message for you, a technical explanation, and an ID number for Paysafe to investigate.
So it's a feedback loop. What happens if there's an issue with how the store has implemented the challenge function itself?
Good question. The documentation points out that certain errors with the challenge function won't be sent back through the callback. Instead, they cause the system to throw exceptions. These exceptions might happen if the store provided a callback that isn't actually a function, or if they provided the wrong number of arguments to the function. It highlights how important it is for developers to get that challenge function set up correctly.
It's like the system saying, hold on, you're not following the rules here.
Precisely. Now, sticking with card details, Paysafe works with Visa and MasterCard on those account updater programs. What are those for?
Keeping things up to date. It's like that automatic software update, but for your card info.
Exactly. It helps avoid failed payments when you get a new card, or if your card details change. Visa and MasterCard use different codes to communicate updates. Like, for Visa, an A means a new card number or expiry date. A C means the account's closed. For MasterCard, valid means all good, no changes. Contact signals the account's been closed, and 34 specifically tells merchants to stop any recurring charges on that card. This helps online stores keep your payment info current and avoid those annoying declined transactions.
Smooth sailing for everyone. Now, we already touched on webhooks. The documentation goes deeper into configuring webhooks. What else should we know about these handy notifications?
Webhooks are like having a direct line to the system, getting instant updates as events happen. When a store sets up a webhook subscription, Paysafe sends a message to their specified web address whenever something relevant occurs. These messages are payouts requests with data in JSON format, plus extra info in the headers. And often, they'll include links back to Paysafe's system where the store can dig deeper into what happened. All this is usually configured through the Paysafe business portal.
Staying in the loop has never been easier. Now, we can't forget about mobile payments. More and more people are shopping on their phones. It seems Paysafe supports Google Pay. How does that work?
Integrating Google Pay is a multi-step process. It involves creating a single-use token using the payment info saved on your Android device. That token is then sent to Paysafe for authorizing or completing the purchase. It lets you pay with your Google Pay details without manually entering all your card info on the store's website or app.
Super convenient. And they also have those mobile single-use tokens. How are those different?
Those mobile single-use tokens are created directly through Paysafe's system, the Customer Vault API. They're designed for purchases through their standard card payments API from mobile devices. The important thing about these tokens is that they have a very short lifespan, usually just 15 minutes. That adds an extra layer of security, reducing the risk of someone using a stolen token fraudulently.
A ticking clock for added safety. Now, when an online store signs up with Paysafe, what's the bare minimum they need to provide to get their account up and running?
For that initial account setup, Paysafe keeps things pretty simple. They just need the business name, the currency they'll be using, their region, what kind of legal entity they are, like sole proprietorship, LLC, etc., and a product code that categorizes their products or services.
That's not too bad. But to actually start processing payments, they need to give a bit more info, right?
Right. Before they can go live and accept payments, they'll need to provide a bit more detail. This includes their specific business category, a phone number, their estimated yearly volume range for sales, the average transaction amount, and something called a merchant descriptor. The merchant descriptor needs to include a dynamic descriptor, which is what shows up on your credit card statement, and a phone number.
Ah, so that's what that is.
Yep. And depending on their location, like Canada or the US, they might also need to provide their tax ID numbers for full activation.
Makes sense. Gotta stay on top of those taxes. Now, for businesses with subscription services, Setting up recurring billing is key. Paysafe has an API to create a subscription. What are the main things you need to define when setting that up?
You need to set how often the billing happens. So the frequency, like daily, monthly, or yearly, and the interval between billings. You also define the number of cycles. If it's ongoing, you'd set that to 0. There are options for what to do if a payment fails, like how many times to retry and how long to wait between attempts. You can even include a one-time setup fee for the subscription.
So all the little details of how the subscription works, and what about info about the customer and the subscription plan itself?
You'd include basic customer details like first name, last name, phone, and email. Each plan has a status, which can be initial while it's being set up, active when people can subscribe, or inactive when you're no longer accepting new subscribers. Individual billing cycles also have important details like the store's internal merchant ref num, the amount and date of the next payment, and importantly, the payment handle token and payment type that'll be used for the recurring charge.
Keeping track of all the moving parts. Security is obviously paramount when storing card details. The documentation has a section on payment method management, specifically best practices for saving cards. What do they recommend?
When a store saves your card details for future purchases, there are some crucial security measures. First, they need to double-check that the code they received actually represents a card. Second, they need to ensure you, the customer, have explicitly agreed to have your card saved. They advise against saving codes that were created from other saved codes. And finally, as an extra layer of security, it's good practice to do a small verification charge or authorization using the temporary code before turning it into a reusable code in their secure system, the customer vault.
Double-checking and verifying at every step. And what about when you, as the customer, want to see your saved cards for future purchases? How do they keep that secure?
To protect your sensitive info, Paysafe recommends using a single-use profile token. This token acts like a temporary key, representing your entire customer profile in their secure vault. The main advantage is that it prevents your actual profile ID and those reusable payment codes from being exposed directly on the website or app. The store gets this temporary key and uses it with the Paysafe checkout system.
Clever. Back to 3D Secure 2 authentication. What are the steps involved in that process?
Typically, there are 3 main stages. First, there's collecting a device fingerprint ID, which helps recognize the device you're using. Then there's the actual authentication of you, the customer, which may be seamless in the background or involve a challenge from your bank. And lastly, depending on the risk assessment, your bank might require an issuer challenge just for extra verification.
And what kind of information can the store include in the authentication request?
More than you might think. They can include shipping address details, like how long you've been using that address. They can flag unusual activity on your account, your purchase history, and even details about specific purchases, like airline tickets. All this helps the system assess the risk level. And the authentication result itself can have specific codes like C and R, which are unique to 3D Secure 2.
So it's a pretty comprehensive picture they're painting for the authentication system. Now, once that's done, it's time to process the payment. What happens when a store uses the API to process a purchase?
Using the auth's endpoint is all about verifying if your account's valid and if you have enough funds. If everything checks out, the funds are put on hold, meaning they're reserved but not transferred to the store yet. Paysafe then sends these authorizations to the banks in a batch at the end of the day to begin the settlement process, where the money actually moves.
Ah, so that's how the funds get reserved. What about actually transferring the money to the store? That's where processing an order with settlement comes in, right?
Exactly. The Hosted Payments API gives options for both authorizing a payment and settling it immediately. When settling an order, the store has some control over email notifications. They can choose not to send a confirmation email to the customer if they handle that themselves. They can also have the system send a notification to themselves by including their email in the request. Plus, they can display payment pages and send emails in different languages based on the locale setting.
So they've got options. And for stores that want more control over when the payment is finalized, there's Authorize Order with separate settlement. And for those who want a branded payment page on their site, there's the Silent Post Order option.
Right. Authorize Order with separate settlement is perfect for those stores that want to make sure the funds are there, but only want to take the money after shipping the order. And Silent Post Order lets stores have the payment form directly on their site, giving them complete control over how it looks. The payment info is securely sent to Paysafe in the background without redirecting you to a separate Paysafe page.
Seamless and stylish. To make integrating all of this easier, especially for mobile apps, Paysafe offers mobile SDKs for both iOS and Android. What's the advantage of using those?
These SDKs are like toolkits, specifically designed to simplify adding Paysafe's payment features to mobile apps. They come with pre-built components for securely collecting card details using hosted fields. They handle all the complexities of 3D secure authentication within the app, and they make it super easy to integrate with popular mobile payment options like Google Pay and Venmo.
Makes the developer's life a whole lot easier. Focusing on the Android SDK, what are the key steps to get it up and running?
When working with the Android SDK, it's crucial to set up two main components. The Paysafe API client, which is responsible for communication with Paysafe's online services, and the 3D Secure service, which handles device identification and manages any 3D secure checks that might be needed. Usually, developers create these components when the app starts up, providing the necessary settings and context.
And what about the iOS SDK? Does it work similarly?
The iOS SDK offers similar capabilities. It has tools for easily managing card input fields within an iOS app, including a component called PS Card Form that can even be styled using Apple's Swift UI framework. It also handles both versions of 3D Secure, ensuring compatibility, and it gives developers ways to respond to user interactions in the card form, like tapping a field or entering incorrect info.
So they've got all the bases covered. Now, for repeat customers or subscriptions, there's a concept of credentials on file, cards API. What's that all about, especially concerning the CVV code?
The Credentials on File framework allows for smoother subsequent transactions by securely storing your card details, either with the store or with Paysafe in their secure vault. However, for security reasons, they can't store the CVV code itself. For regular purchases you initiate, you'll usually need to enter the CVV. But for recurring payments that are specifically flagged as recurring using a stored credential setting with the type as recurring or top-up, the CVV might not be required for those automatic payments after the initial setup.
It's like the system recognizing a trusted pattern. Makes those recurring payments a breeze. Now, Paysafe supports a variety of regional payment preferences. What are some examples of these alternative payment methods?
For folks in Portugal, they offer MBWay through Skrill Quick Checkout, a popular mobile payment app linked to a phone number and PNN. Then there's Mazuma, which enables direct payments from bank accounts, usually with a quick redirect to a secure page for bank selection and login. In Canada, they support EFT, electronic fund transfer, for direct withdrawals and deposits from bank accounts. And of course, there's BACS, direct debit for the UK, as we discussed earlier.
It's great that they cater to different preferences around the world. What about businesses that need to send money to their customers? Do they have options for withdrawals?
They do. One option is instant withdrawal interchecks, which allows for quick payouts. It requires businesses to have a certain amount of money with interchecks and uses a special permanent code called Payment Handle Token to initiate the withdrawal. They also support sending money to cards saved in Apple Pay wallets, using the Apple Pay system to get a secure code for the card.
So they've got payout options covered too. Now, how do businesses connecting to Paysafe systems identify themselves? How do they get those API keys?
Obtaining API keys is a crucial first step for integration. Businesses usually get these keys from the Paysafe business portal. These keys typically consist of a username and password combined in a specific format, username:password. This combined key is then used to authenticate all their requests to Paysafe systems. And it's super important to use the correct API address depending on whether they are testing their integration or actually processing live transactions.
Getting the address right is key. And what about businesses that operate in different countries or handle multiple currencies? How does Paysafe handle multiple currencies?
When a business deals with multiple currencies, they need to link each currency to a specific account ID in their Paysafe setup. This ensures that transactions are processed in the right currency and funds go to the correct account. Interestingly, if a card transaction involves 3D Secure, this currency-to-account ID link is also needed for the initial check to see if the card is even enrolled in 3D Secure. This happens before the actual payment is processed.
So they're checking everything in advance. Now, in business models like PayFac, Payment Facilitator, where a company helps multiple smaller businesses process payments, there are different ways to handle merchant identification. What's the difference between the shared MID and assigned MID models?
In the shared MID, merchant ID model, the PayFac basically uses one main merchant ID for all the smaller businesses they're working with. This can make the initial setup easier. On the other hand, with the assigned MID model, each smaller business gets its own unique merchant ID, even though they're still working under the PayFac umbrella. This gives them more independence in how their transactions are handled. However, the PayFac is still the main point of contact with Paysafe. Paysafe supports both models, catering to different needs and levels of autonomy.
Choices. I like it. Sometimes it's necessary to verify bank account details, particularly for direct debits. Paysafe offers an API to look up a bank account verification. What kind of info can you get from that?
This API call lets businesses verify certain bank account details. They'll usually need to provide their unique merchant ref num. The information returned might include the account holder's name, the bank's identification numbers, and sometimes even a payment token for future transactions with that account.
Handy. What if a business needs to find info about a past sale but only has their internal reference number? Can they look up a purchase transaction using that?
Absolutely.
Yep.
If they don't have the specific transaction ID from Paysafe, they can use the merchant ref num they would have included in the original payment request. The API lets them search for transactions based on that reference number.
So, multiple ways to track things down. Now, for businesses handling recurring payments via direct debit, is there a way to securely store their customers' bank details for those repeat payments?
Yes. They can use tokenized direct debit requests through Paysafe's secure system, the Customer Vault. This allows them to securely store customer bank info and then use a special token for processing those recurring payments without repeatedly asking for bank details.
Secure and convenient. For additional security, especially with new customers, it can be useful to verify the cardholder's name against the bank's records. The documentation mentions simulating ANI responses. How does that work in the testing environment?
ANI, or account name inquiry, is a Visa feature, letting businesses check if the customer's name matches the name on record at the issuing bank. In Paysafe's testing environment, businesses can simulate different responses, like a perfect match, a partial match, or no match, by adding specific codes to the beginning of the first and last names used in their test requests. This lets them test how their system handles various verification outcomes.
So they can test for different scenarios. Smart. When you have platforms with many sellers, managing accounts and settlements can get complex. The documentation mentions standard account hierarchy model and sub-account hierarchy model. What's the difference?
Standard